So in this video, we're going to talk about how the spring brake chamber works to basically apply and release the brakes. So if the truck has no air pressure at all built up in it, it's been setting or whatever, this is what we would show. These gauges are tied into the ports we previously talked about. So on our service brake side of the chamber, we're setting it basically 0. On our spring brake side, we're setting it 0. So inside this chamber, remember we said that there's a big scary spring in here under about 2,000 pounds of force that is pushing this push rod out to apply the brake. So we have 2,000 pounds of force here. Some say 1,800, depends on the chamber, but to make math easy, let's just say 2,000 pounds of force. Okay. The reason we wanted this at 90 degrees is for maximum leverage. There is roughly, on most slack adjusters, that can vary a bit, 6 inches of leverage between the center of this S-cam shaft that is actually twisting to apply the brake shoes and push them out against the drum. There's 6 inches between here and the center of this clevis. So if we get this at exactly 90 degrees, we're getting a full 6 inches of multiplication, so times 6. If we have 2,000 pounds back here of spring tension multiplied by 6, then we have 12,000 pounds of pressure pushing those brake shoes into that drum to keep the truck parked. It's obviously not going to roll. Okay, so that is enough tension basically, unless you're like on a mountain, 80,000 pounds or something like that, to slow this truck down and bring it to a halt in the event that we lost all air pressure. We don't want an 80,000 pound truck rolling down the road with absolutely no brakes. That's going to end very bad and be on the news, and anyway, it's just a bad situation all the way around. So they incorporated this big spring in here to be able to stop this truck in the event that we lose air pressure. So I've got air hooked up to this little trainer here. Down here at the bottom, we have our parking brake. Now it's going to look different on the truck. It's going to be a pull diamond type knob normally that says diamond shaped yellow and says parking brake. So right now our parking brake is on, meaning there's no air pressure and that spring has the truck stopped. I'm going to flip this to parking brake off, and we're going to watch what happens here at the brake chamber and the slack adjuster. Okay, so if you notice, this moved away. Now we don't have that spring pressure pushing on the brakes. The drum is actually free to rotate. The shoes moved away from the drum. And if we go back to this other side, we now have roughly almost 120 pounds of air pressure. It's roughly about 115 applied to the diaphragm that's inside the spring brake chamber. So what that does, we said before that this chamber with the spring was putting out about 12,000 pounds of force. Now in the previous video, we talked about the diaphragm area. If it was a type 30, then it has 30 square inches. So I'm going to forget the 115 and make the math easier for us. Let's just say that was 100 PSI. If I have 100 PSI applied into this port, the area of this brake diaphragm is 30 square inches. So that's 100 PSI per square inch. So that 100 is multiplied by 30, so that gives us 3,000 pounds of force on the diaphragm pushing back on the spring. 3,000 pounds of force is going to defeat 2,000 pounds of spring brake tension. So it's going to keep it pushed back. If the truck starts losing air pressure though, and I get down close to 60 PSI over here, then the spring becomes stronger than the air pressure pushing on the diaphragm, because now I have 60 psi times 30. And if you do all the math, you can figure out that the spring becomes stronger, starts overriding and pushing this back out to apply our brakes. So that's how the spring brake part works as far as a emergency brake, meaning that if we lose air pressure, it's going to apply and stop the truck. So right now the brake drum's free because I have air pressure applied holding the spring back to allow it to roll, and I have no pressure in this front section pushing this out to apply the brake. So when we step on the brake, or the foot valve basically, meaning we want the truck to slow down or stop, I'm going to flip this little switch, which would be the foot valve inside the truck, service brake, same as when you push on the brake pedal on your car. Now, air pressure in the service brake side of this is applying the brake. So the spring is held, pulled back, but air pressure in the center section is pushing the push rod out to apply the brake. If I come around and look at my gauges, I still have my air pressure holding off the spring brakes. I have about 50 pounds here applying the service brake. So now the truck is slowing down or stopping off of the service brake side and not the spring brake side. So with air applied to both sides of the chamber, then I have service brake applied, parking brake or emergency brake off, and the truck is stopping on that service brake pressure. If I let off my foot valve, now my spring brake is still released. The truck's rolling because I have no pressure on the service brake side. So air pressure on spring brake, no air pressure on service, is driving down the road normal. If I apply my parking brake by pulling out the diamond-shaped knob, now I have no pressure on either side of the chamber. The spring has the brakes mechanically applied. The truck's not moving, it's parked.